One of the things that we're doing, the seminar, or what I'm doing today, is called Maintaining the Balance in the Ministry Fishbowl. And as you can see up there, in ministry, it's sort of like you're on view for everyone to see you, isn't it? And let's see if I can work this little gizmo. Yes. I use humor. I think it's fun. I happen to be a hospital clown, so I do go in and use humor with patients occasionally. But it says, first, I'd like to thank the Board of Deacons for this exciting opportunity to finally criticize the pastor and wife in an official capacity. And I thought, well, yeah, when you're in ministry, everyone feels like they have the right. And the second one, sometimes not only do people feel like they have the right to be very critical, but have you ever been standing in the lobby and have this happen? I know I have. You feel like you need to pass out numbers, and the lady here is calling for the pastor a number, 27, and someone goes and picks a number and says, I wonder if we're making too many demands on the pastor's time. One Sabbath, I was standing in the lobby, and I looked, and there were like 7 people lined up. And I think this gets worse. I did one trip for the General Conference and did similar, and I looked, and they found out I was a nurse, and I looked up, and there were 27 people lined up with physical illnesses. And I thought, I'm only a nurse. It was very unusual. So sometimes we just feel like there are too many demands on us in ministry. And let's see, I skipped something. So is there a problem in our ministries? And I'm trying today to speak to spouses, but I'm sure I'm going to speak. I see several, what I think is probably ministers. And we have some female ministers here? Yay, okay. And some of you, I think there may be a few ministers' spouses that are male, and that you're very unique. I mean, at least as female pastors' wives, we have a lot of people to talk to at these meetings. But who does the male pastor's wife talk to, pastor's spouse talk to? But anyway, so is there a problem in our ministries? Let's look. When Dan and I were writing this seminar, we said, okay, let's think this through. And he and I started saying, well, we found a lot of problems. Workaholism, expectations. How about communication? Not only with our spouse, but with church members, roles. I asked one of the pastors that I was visiting with since we've come here, and he says, time in this conference, this union is probably the biggest thing because all of you are so stretched. You have huge territories, and it's just hard to find enough time. Frequent moves. How often do you move in England, United Kingdom? Every 3 to 5 years. And you just barely get used to the new house payment or new condo payment, and all of a sudden you move again and it goes up. Or you just get that perfect piece of furniture and you move and it doesn't fit anywhere in the new house. And of course, it's wonderful that the conference does help with moves, but even in the States, we used to have a curtain fund, which I thought was wonderful. But even the curtain fund, and it never is totally covered, so that's stress. Spending time with family, sometimes that's a fight. And as I said before, finances. And sometimes trying to get everything done, we become workaholics. So there's several common causes of imbalance between our ministry and our families. Then let's look at some of those. A lot of times we have erroneous personal attitudes. And I came into ministry with Dan with several of those. Another cause is external expectations. How many of you have church members with expectations? Any of you have certain expectations? They expect the pastor's wife or the pastor's spouse to do da-da-da-da-da. And different cultures can be different ways. In the States, we have some cultures that they just expect that pastor's wife to be at every meeting, every time. Some, they expect you to play the piano. Well, they got a big disappointment with me. because I play the kazoo, and that's about it. So external expectations, that can also be from each other. Another thing that causes imbalance is sometimes we become so self-focused with our ministries. We had a minister that just loved to write, and he became so self-focused with publishing books that he spent all of his extra money, he spent all of his extra time reaching the world, and his poor family really felt neglected. And sometimes a drive to succeed. How many baptisms have you had this year? How many people have you invited to church? And sometimes there's an insecurity-driven service. Dan and I are not multi-generation Adventists. I grew up Baptist, at least part of my life, became an Adventist when I was 6 or 7. My family did. And his family came in the church because someone sold a Daniel and Revelation to his mother, and she stuck it in a closet and pulled it out about 25 years later to prove an Adventist that what they were studying was wrong, and she studied herself right into the church. But the insecurity of we haven't always been Adventists, so we have to work harder and study harder. Used to be senior pastor at Kettering was baptized, in his 20s. So he didn't even know basic Bible stories. Even though he went to seminary, it was very hard for him. So he'd study so hard just to learn what we grew up knowing. So sometimes our insecurity will drive us and make us work too much. Let's see if we can go to the next slide. And because I don't have time to go over everything, this could be a weekend seminar, what I'm talking about. But I'm going to talk about the erroneous personal attitudes first, because those are something we can do something about, our beliefs. I can't change my husband, I can't change my church, my conference, my world, my community, a lot, but I can change how I feel and how I relate. So one of the erroneous personal attitudes is I must be perfect. Just as I need to be perfect, I need to have the perfect clothes and the perfect weight and the perfect house. And none of us are perfect. We just can't be perfect. And so when you believe that, it can get you into real problems. We have conference president right now who is just a wonderful fella. His name's Ron Halverson. Some of you may know him. And Ron and Buffy have moved a lot, and so that means they don't have a lot of equity. And they moved, I think, to Texas several years ago. And the only house they could afford, it was not a bad house, but it had gold shag carpet. Do you know what shag did? And by the way, if there's anything I say you don't understand because I'm from the U.S., like I didn't understand chips this morning, what they were, or what lorries were. So if you don't understand something, say, what do you mean by that? But anyway, Buffy had ugly, ugly carpet. And, she wanted to entertain, but her house didn't look perfect. And she said, what am I going to do? So Buffy prayed, and she goes, Lord, I want a perfect house to invite people home to. And the Lord said, start having people home anyway. So Buffy vacuumed that ugly shag carpet, and she did the best she could. She's a great entertainer. Even on a low budget, she does much better than I think I do. And she goes, I gave that gold shag carpet to God, and I had people home. I knew my house would never be perfect, but my hospitality was open and warm. And she lives in a much nicer place now, but I have always kept that. And every time I'm tempted to think, we live in a small house. That way I could afford to do more of what I wanted to do. There's lots of things I love to do, and I knew that if I worked 60 hours a week, I wouldn't be doing the things that meant most to me. So we live in a smaller house, and I've had 60 people home. And they're just crammed in like sardines. I've had them in the upstairs, my son's old bedroom. I've had them all over the basement. People don't care. They don't expect you to be perfect. They don't expect you to have a house like someone that is loaded. They love when you love them. So we don't need to be perfect. Oh, and here's another. This fella is trying to carry a load, all sorts of hymnals. And he's not doing a good job because no one's helping him. And he says, and the parishioners say he doesn't carry a tune very well either. So sometimes the expectations are big, aren't they? Sometimes we have erroneous attitudes about ourselves. I must earn God's love. I don't know what they have in the United Kingdom, but in the States, when I was a little girl going to Sabbath school, they would have this little list, this paper. And you may remember this. They would say, and how many people did you give tracts to this week? And you'd hold your fingers up, 3, 3, 4, and you were looking to see what everyone else did. Well, how many people did you tell about Jesus this week? And and they go on. And so, it really got me thinking, if I do enough, I can earn my way. But, and I'm sure it's nice that we do that stuff. It's great. But we don't have to earn God's love, not at all. So we don't have to earn God's love. Sometimes we have erroneous attitudes about our parishioners. This was a big one for me. I'm a people pleaser. I know this about myself. I should be loved by everyone. How many of you think that's true? I was talking to one of the pastors up front, and I said, never. You will never be loved by everyone in your church. And like I said, Dan and I were going to tell this together. We were brand new in ministry, probably in our mid-20s, just out of seminary. You know how you get out and you're just on fire and you're going to save the whole world and the whole community. And Dan was his preaching was coming along. It wasn't perfect. We had one of the saints from the church come up to him and she said, you really shouldn't have gone into ministry. You should have gone into music because you sing much better than you preach. And, I could tell he was crushed. But, and being on Ministry Caroline, I hear these stories. So we're not going to be loved by everybody, people. Oh, hi, Nestor. For those of you, this is Nestor. He's the other consultant counselor that's here. But there is no way that you'll be loved by everybody. It just won't happen. I think if you tell yourself that before you go into ministry, and it's okay to not be loved by everyone, you're going to do a lot better. It's just going to happen. Oh, and here's some examples. I'm sorry, dear, but your remote control doesn't work in church. There's always going to be some person that wants to remote and shut you up, whatever you're saying, so wants to be in control. Oh, and here, this couple has gone to a marriage counselor, and the counselor says, what do you do for fun other than criticize the pastor? So when you go home, if there's one thing I want you to remember, you don't have to have everyone like you. In fact, if you really ask, if I went to the church, I could probably within 5 minutes find someone that doesn't like you. I know if you come to Kettering, you'll find that about me. Sometimes we have erroneous ideas about, another one about parishioners is I should meet everybody's needs. Can you do that? No. We were in a large city in the United States and had a church of about 600 members. And Dan was the only pastor. You have to go over 600 to get an associate. And we were like at 598 or something, so it was close. But the church had lots and lots of needs. There were people in that church, I'm telling you, they would have moved in and lived with us if we'd let them, because they just were just bottomless pits of need. And I began to realize there that you can't meet everyone's needs. You have to give them to God. You do what you can. You pray about, Lord, who are the most important people for me to reach out to? Everyone's important. But some people, and you have them in your church, I'm sure, they would just come, they would never be enough of you to meet their needs. In fact, this is a little boy in the church. He says, "You are my pastor, right?" Right. Pastors help their people when they have problems, right? Right. Well, and the little boy brings his school book and his math problems. If these are too tough for you, I can write to Aunt Landers, and she's one of our newspaper columnist writers. So I hope you don't have anybody coming to help with math problems yet. And, that might be a way to make a friend, but yet, no, you're not there for every problem in the church. Another attitude is I should always be available and on duty. Now, Dan and I really bought into this one when we first got out. Always wanted to be there, morning, noon, and night. We began to learn. I was expecting my first child, and I was due. I was full term, looked like an Easter egg. And Dan was so supportive. He went to Lamaze classes with me, and we had someone die in the church the week I was due, and Dan's out the door to go preach the funeral. He's the only pastor, and my water broke. Right? And I can still see his face. He has his Bible in his hand. His eyes are as big as saucers, and I'm laying there thinking, they said if this happens, I'll have the baby quickly. So talk about ambivalent and always being available on duty. The way we solved this, he went and did the quickest funeral sermon in history, and the head elder did the graveside. And yes, 22 hours later, I wasn't fast. I had that baby. But we can't always be available on duty. Now, sometimes our erroneous personal attitudes are about our spouse. You can, and you should meet all my needs. Can a spouse do that? That's a tough one. I happen to think that emotionally, sexually, spiritually, yes, a spouse can meet our needs. But sometimes I know I need girlfriends, and Dan needs male friends. Sometimes he just needs to hang out with someone else and play racquetball. Sometimes I need to go and giggle with the girlfriends. In fact, I have a support team. They're on, I don't know if you have the app here called Marco Polo, where you can talk to each other. I think it's a lot like WhatsApp. And my support team is praying for me right now. There are a lot of pastors' wives and girlfriends, and they're such a support to me. No matter where I am in the world, we're talking. In fact, I took a picture of this room and said, "Wow, this is exciting. Pray for me. I'm scared." So I think it's important to have other friends, to have other pastors, to have people that also meet our needs. Sometimes imbalance can be caused by, we say to our spouse, "You owe me." Well, I went to the evangelistic meeting, so you need to go here with me. And that's not what life is about, owing people. It's all your fault. When we say something is all someone else's fault, we don't take responsibility ourselves for our actions, for what we did. So sometimes when you say it's all your fault, it can make an imbalance. I shouldn't have to change. All of us at times need to change, don't we? Okay, another statement, and this is a particular one. If you were a good Christian, you would. Have you ever said that to your spouse? Dr. Peach, who is on our Ministry Caroline team, is a really good friend. In fact, as Nestor said, we're a lot like family. We've worked together so many years, under so many circumstances. We go on these trips, and we're like family. And Dr. Peach would come up to me, and he would say, "If you were a good pastor's wife, you would." And I remember saying, "Go away," because he loves to tease. But that's an attitude that will get you in trouble. Let's see Well, we've talked a lot about the problems and stuff, but how do you achieve balance? And what I'm hoping to do today, I consider these workshops, when you come to the ministerial meetings, you have a toolkit of how you cope and what you do and different techniques you use. Probably all of you have different toolboxes. I'm hoping that maybe if you only take home one technique or one thing that will help you achieve balance, that will help you live in ministry and be fulfilled and happy, that's what my dream is today. I care about each of you or I wouldn't be here. In fact, like I said, I'm retired. I don't have to do this anymore. I choose to do it because I love pastors and their spouses, and I love their children. Our children, as you know, especially those of you my age, a lot of them are in trouble. A lot of them are out there, and all of us are praying. And it is just so important to get this balance. So step one is pray. It is so important to pray. Lord, give me balance. Help me make my family important. Ministry is important. I love ministry, or I wouldn't have done it all these years, but it is so important to balance, to have your family be important. And then explore, what can I do? We're going to talk over a few things and talk about what we can do, but then decide, yes, Lord, with your help, I'm going to make some of these changes. It's not one-time choice that we make that determines our lives. It's those little choices we repeat day after day. Well, how do we achieve balance? We can increase trust. And how do we do? And we can do that by really trying to understand our spouse, our child. I know that Dan knows about me that my love language, what makes me feel cherished as a wife, is when he spends time with me. And it may be that way for many of you spouses because time is in short supply when you're married to a minister. And poor Dan found out the opposite way. When I took chaplaincy to get through my residency, I had 80-hour weeks. And I really had to work the year I did that to make our marriage have any time. And so understand your spouse's love language. I'm just so glad his love language isn't cooking because I am not a good cook. He's the cook. Attend to the little things. When we were married 20 years, we're married almost 47 now. But I still remember this. He did everything. He got me 20 cards, and he put them all over the house, and he took me to 2020 Harshman Boulevard. Everything that he did that day had 20 in it, and it was so romantic, and it was very special. And it doesn't have to be anything big like a big anniversary date, but just the little love note on the mirror. I know sometimes when Dan used to go on trips like this, instead of me, I would put love notes where his sermon was that he was going to preach or something, just to say, hey, I'm remembering you. And he just took me in his arms a few minutes ago before he crawled back to the bed and had prayer with me. That means a lot. Keep your commitments. If you do make a commitment to your spouse, either one of you, do your best to keep that. There are always circumstances that you just can't do it, but keep your commitments. I remember we had a big anniversary dinner planned. It was very important to me, and we only do that, the big one, once a year. We try to date at least 1 hour a week where we go out and just sit and talk, but this was a big one. And we had planned it. We'd made reservations. We'd gotten babysitters and dog sitters, and so it was really big. And I was excited because he was very busy during that time, and I knew I would get some time. And at the last minute, we got a call from the conference president, and he said, by the way, Dan, I'm in town, and I want to meet with you. Guess when it was? The very night that I had the appointment with Dan, and I thought, oh. And I heard Dan say, I would love to meet with you, but I already have a very important appointment. And I remember thinking, oh, that is so special. And we went on our big date, and Dan met with him later. But I can still remember that, and I know that Ed, who was our conference president, has forgotten that years ago. He's a good friend. But I have never forgotten that I was put first. So he kept his commitment. Clarify expectations. That's important because, honey, like you may be doing evangelistic meetings or something big, and you may not have time. And spouses, for you, during vacation Bible school, or if you're doing a big presentation, you may not have time. So ahead of time, I know that I can't have a lot of expectations during certain times. But if you clarify that, you don't get feelings hurt. Show personal integrity. When you give your word, keep your word. Now, there are times when you have to, I call it make a withdrawal. When you have to break and you just can't for some reason. Like we had a death and it was a car accident. It was horrible. Someone got killed. And of course, during a time like that, you just drop everything else and go do it. And but if you've made a withdrawal from your children, not gone to a game or something you promised, make sure that you apologize sincerely and make it up. All this is important for balance. Another thing is protect your home, protect your territory, make your home your castle, make couple time a priority. Boy, I'll tell you, that couple time can really get ripped apart. Have you noticed that? Carve out time for your family, for your children. We've gone over that a little bit. Dan and I look for creative adventure. We both are very creative and we love to do new things. This is a new thing for us. It is so much fun being here in England and getting to meet all of you, and it's just another world for us. One thing we did last month, we went through Savannah, Georgia. Georgia is a southern state, has long moss on the trees. It's just like a different world. And Dan made an appointment. Do you have I'm sure you have Segways here. Does anybody know what a Segway is? The little thing you ride on and it has two wheels. Well, I had never ridden on a Segway. And I thought, I'm 69. I wonder if I'm going to break my neck on this thing. But Dan made the appointment and paid for it. I said, okay, I'm going to try this. And we had a very wonderful adventure. Here I am zipping all over the streets and around cars on this little gizmo, and I did fine. But doing new things, being creative as a couple, and sometimes you don't have money to rent a Segway or go on a motorboat or ride horses, but get out and we had a murder mystery at the local library, and Dan and I dressed up and went to that and took part. That was fun. It was just never done anything like it, probably won't ever do anything again. It was free. That was important. It was free. But find some different things for each other and be creative. Support your family when under fire. Not only do Dan and I support each other, but like if we hear another pastor in the district, we have a lot of Adventist churches in our area. And one time, one of the pastors was having a real rough time emotionally. And we gathered around that pastor, just all the wives. We gathered around his wife. And the men gathered around the husband to support them during that rough time. Because, all of us need love. Now, if you're spread out enough in this conference, you may not be able to do it physically. But, you can email, you can use your apps, anything. If you hear another brother or sister in the church is having a rough time, take time to write that letter, to do that phone call. Because you just never know what someone else is going through. Also, look for teachable opportunities. Dan, every once in a while, he'll say, honey, come over here, and he'll teach me something new. He goes, have we ever thought about doing this? And yes, people go, oh, you seem like you get along so well. Oh, we still fight and argue some. And if you've been married almost 50 years and you haven't, wow, I want to meet you. But we know how to disagree, agree to disagree. I got some good ideas for reading on coping. And of course, since we came over in one itty-bitty suitcase, I didn't bring these books. But I did bring some care notes if any of you come in and do the counseling. I have care notes on everything. Even if you need something maybe for a member, I have a lot of different things. But this is a really good book. You can still wear cute shoes and other great advice from an unlikely preacher's wife. She was a very unlikely one, and she talks about living in ministry. Another good read on coping is The Best Yes, Making Wise Decisions in the Midst of Endless Demands. And the demands are endless. If you say yes to everything, you will never have a minute with your family. I had to learn to say no, and that was very hard for me. Is it hard for anyone else here, or am I by myself? Is it hard? So there's several ways, and I'm not going to go into all the detail. One of the things I did learn, though, was to use broken record. When someone, like if Nestor said, Richa, will you do Ministry Caroline on Wednesday? I could say, Nestor, I would love to do Ministry Caroline, but no, I can't do it on Wednesday. And then if Nestor comes back, but Richa, I really need you. I'm going to do something. I would say, Nestor, you're just so special that you think of me to ask me, but I can't do Ministry Caroline on Wednesday. So you keep repeating until they can hear you. And Nestor's good about hearing me. But this will give you some ideas also. There's another one, She Can't Even Play the Piano, Insights for Ministry Wives. And those of you that are ministry men, spouses, I'm sure there's some good stuff in here, but I think they need books for the men spouses, the male spouses. So feel free to write. I couldn't find any. Now, we're going to go over a little bit more about achieving balance. There's several steps. You as a person, you as a spouse, as a parent, a church member, an employee, and a community. And what I suggest to people, if you're trying to find balance, you may have seen this before, but just at least figure out what's most important to you as a person. I roughly did this. They had jog, and you will never see me jog. Nestor jogs, but I walk. And so one of my priorities is walking 3 times a week. I have a book on decluttering. I'm at the declutter age, where I need to get rid of stuff. So it's study to lose 200 pounds this weekend. It's 200 pounds of junk. This book is really good, so I wanted to study more on it and read from the Gospel of John and meditate on it. So those maybe are my personal things. I want to admit, since I'm retired, I don't have to coordinate as much as I did when I worked full-time. My second role as a spouse. If you don't set a date to go out with your mate, you probably won't do it. So make sure, put it on the calendar. Go out as a couple. Maybe you want to read a chapter of the 4 Habits of Joy-Filled Marriage. For Dan and I, it was discussing our upcoming vacation, getting dates. How many of you both work? Both sides of the couple? Lots. So I don't know about you, but I had to, because I was a chaplain, I was on call and he was on call for the church. We had to really work to get a day that would work for both of us that we had asked off. So sometimes you need to really work together to figure out when you're going to take that vacation, but it's so important. And I would like to say the more stressful work you do, if you work in social work, pastoring, psychiatry, EMT, or what, I don't know what they call them. Do they call them that over here? People that do ambulance, firework, all that type. You really need more vacations probably than normal because you're giving so much at work. So plan those vacations. But another role is father or mother. And, so put the most important things you're doing for your family. Take Billy to the restaurant for a choice for a meal. We used to do that with our kids once a month. They got to pick. I took one kid, Dan took the other. And we just would go and sit and talk with our kid about what was on their heart. And they were so excited. The really funny thing that happened is one night, it was family go out to eat night with the kids. We picked the same restaurant. We got there and walked in, and there was Dan and the other son. So we just all ate together. Helping a kid with his science project, maybe. The next role is, what do you do at church? I simply put the type things I did. Maybe I had an appointment with someone that just lost their mate. Put that, maybe planning with the VBS team. making the greeter schedule for next quarter, decorating kindergarten, calling the deaconess team to plan for Christmas baskets. All this stuff is wonderful stuff. It all takes time. So, community. You know, at different stages in our lives, our ministry, we have more time to give than others. If you're a mom or a dad of small little babies, and I see several of them, you're not going to have the time to do as much as someone who doesn't have little kids at home. And Sharon Kress from the GC came and gave a talk to ministers' wives, and some of you may have heard her several years ago, and it really opened my eyes. They're just, when you have little babies, you don't always do as much, and sometimes it's just enough. Some of you may be caring for elder parents with Alzheimer's, and that is your ministry, family ministry, because you really can't do much else. So just because I give all these examples, please don't let it make you feel overwhelmed. But my guess is a lot of you do this and more. Community, it's fun to participate in Walk for Wellness. We have one of those in our district. So balance is so important. And I skipped something here. Let's go back. Well, somewhere I had a calendar, and it's disappeared. But I would say all these things for each role, write them out. Go back and just write down what's most important to you. Put that on the calendar, but make your personal, your spiritual, number one. Put the wife, the kids, your relationship with God in there. Fill in around the rest of your calendar with community and church and different roles. And that way you can hope to find some balance. It won't be perfect, but it's a try. And your mate will notice. And I think that having events like this are wonderful. I hope each of you get to go down and sit in that hot tub and not just sit in meetings. Go down, do some self-care. I see you in the hallways and little huddles talking and laughing. And last night as I went by 2 or 3 of you, I said, that's where it's at. As much happens in these huddles as happens in here. Because you're making some of the friends you're making today are going to be friends and support you for the rest of your life. So my prayer is that you're going to be able to take your family and your church and balance so that when you get to the end of your life, you'll be able to say, you know, thank you, Lord, for helping me balance. And I appreciate you've been such good listeners today. And I am glad to talk to any of you. I remember, I am just like you. I'm just across the ocean, so everyone thinks, oh, we need to listen to this lady. And no, I am just a pastor's wife. And I shouldn't say just because I love what I've done. So please come talk to me. I'd love to meet you. Thank you.